All right, so you've come to us with some pretty concerning information.
Yeah.
And you're looking for clarity on what it means for you personally.
Right.
And that's exactly what we're going to try to do today.
Absolutely.
Dive into these sources that you've shared with us that point toward a potential spike in tsunami risk in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to try to unpack the key takeaways regarding this risk, pinpoint which regions your sources suggest could be most vulnerable, and then also outline those critical preparedness measures that you need to have on your radar.
That's exactly it. And it's going to be a fascinating discussion because we're drawing on some really interesting experts here.
Yeah, for sure.
We have a seismologist, Dr. Carlos Mena from the University of Tokyo.
Okay.
And Dr. Laura Rojas, who is a risk management expert from the UN.
Gotcha. So we've got the science and
the what to do about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Side of things.
So the backdrop to all of this is a bit unsettling, right? We're hearing about this very active phase in the Pacific Ring of Fire,
right?
Which is that zone around the Pacific known for its earthquakes and volcanoes. And that, in turn, is leading to a higher chance of some significant tsunamis.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking like a 40% increase.
Yeah, it's a significant increase. And I think what's really interesting is it's not just limited to the Pacific.
Right. That's what's so interesting about your sources.
Yeah.
They indicate that there are potential concerns in other areas like Greece, Turkey, and Spain due to underwater fault lines there.
Yeah, and it's these fault lines that are really driving this heightened level of concern.
Okay, so let's talk about those fault lines a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that's making people so concerned right now?
Well, it's really the way all these different pieces of data are aligning to suggest this increase in activity. And the core idea really revolves around the Pacific Ring of Fire entering this hyperactive phase.
Yeah. And Dr. Mingener really highlights this. He's talking about this, this 40% increase in the probability of major tsunamis in regions like Japan, Chile, Indonesia, even the western coast of the United States.
Yeah.
And he sees like this real convergence of factors pointing in this direction.
Yeah, 40%.
Yeah, that's a big number.
Yeah, it really gets your attention.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, these aren't just abstract probabilities we're talking about.
Exactly.
We saw in 2011 that earthquake and subsequent tsunami in Japan.
Right.
And that's a stark reminder that these large-scale events can and unfortunately do occur.
Absolutely.
And even regions with advanced preparedness like Japan, they can still face some catastrophic consequences.
Absolutely. And that's a good point you just brought up.
Yeah.
The potential risk here isn't geographically confined to just the Pacific Basin.
Right.
Dr. Rojas brings in a crucial broader perspective here, emphasizing the potential for tsunami events in the Mediterranean Sea, affecting countries like Greece, Turkey, and Spain. And this risk stems from active fault lines that are under the water in that region.
Interesting.
So it's not just specific. Ooh, we got to think more broadly.
Think about this globally.
Yeah.
So if the potential for tsunamis extends beyond those areas that we typically think about when we think about tsunamis.
Right.
Like, what does that mean for global preparedness?
Right.
Because it sounds like...
what does that even look like?
Yeah, what does that even look like? And is everybody on the same page?
And that's where Dr. Rojas gets really concerned.
Okay.
She draws attention to this imbalance in how much different regions are investing in early warning systems.
Okay.
So some areas, particularly parts of the Pacific, have made progress in establishing these sophisticated systems.
Yeah.
But other regions that face potential risk might not have that crucial infrastructure and the protocols to provide those timely warnings.
Wow. So it's a real disparity.
Yeah, real mixed bag in terms of who's ready and who isn't.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a situation where the scientific data is suggesting this heightened risk, not just in those usual Pacific hotspots, but in other regions as well.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the level of preparedness globally is not uniform.
Yeah, not at all.
So let's talk about those hotspots for a second.
Okay.
Based on your sources, what countries and regions are under the most scrutiny right now?
So Dr. Magna kind of broke it down into like a top 3.
Okay, I like it.
And the first area of concern that he points to is Japan and the Philippines.
Okay.
And the main driver there is the intense tectonic activity that's occurring, where these oceanic plates are being forced under the continental plates.
Okay.
It's a process called subduction.
Okay.
And just imagine like two giant conveyor belts colliding.
Yeah. One slowly being pushed under the other.
Yeah.
This builds up immense pressure over time, and it's eventually released in the form of these powerful earthquakes,
Right.
which can then trigger tsunamis.
Right. So that zone where those plates are grinding against each other
Yes.
has always been a source of,
It's a huge source of seismic activity.
huge seismic events.
Yeah.
So what's number 2 on his list?
So number 2, he points to the coastlines of Chile and Peru.
Okay.
And this area has a long history of what we call megathrust earthquakes.
Okay.
And these are the largest and most powerful earthquakes that occur at these subduction zones.
Wow.
And because of that geological history, both Chile and Peru are very susceptible to these tsunamis.
Wow. Okay. So a history of these really huge earthquakes.
Huge earthquakes.
Yeah, makes this potential.
Makes it even more concerning.
Yeah, even more concerning.
Yeah.
What about number 3? What rounds out his top 3?
Okay, so number 3 is Indonesia.
Okay.
And here the risk is a little bit more complex because you have the continued volcanic activity, specifically of Krakatoa. And Dr. Mena emphasizes that a significant tsunami could be triggered not just by an underwater earthquake, but also by a substantial collapse of the volcano itself into the sea.
Oh, wow.
And if that were to happen, it would displace this massive volume of water very rapidly and create a tsunami.
Oh, wow. That's scary.
Yeah, so it's like a double whammy.
Yeah, so earthquake or volcano.
Exactly.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Rojas also brought up some areas in Central America that she was concerned about.
Yes.
What's the situation there?
She specifically mentioned the Pacific coastlines of Costa Rica and Nicaragua. And the concerning factors in this region are the combination of these densely populated coastal areas, coupled with a potential lack of clearly defined evacuation protocols.
Oh, so they're just not as prepared.
They're just not as prepared.
Gotcha.
And this vulnerability is potentially amplified by the El Niño phenomenon.
Oh, right.
That's anticipated in 2025.
Yeah.
El Nino, this climate pattern in the Pacific Ocean, influences weather patterns globally. And in this region, it could exacerbate coastal risks.
Okay, so a combination of geography and maybe not having...
And that lack of preparedness.
Yeah, that lack of preparedness.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know that some people listening are probably thinking, okay, we hear about potential natural disasters all the time.
Right.
What is it about 2025?
Yeah, why is this year any different?
Yeah, why is this year any different?
Right.
Is there something special about 2025, or is this just kind of like a...
Well, Dr. Mezzane addresses this.
Okay.
And he talks about Earth's seismic cycles.
Okay.
And the idea is that our planet experiences these longer-term periods of both higher and lower seismic activity, kind of like weather patterns have seasons.
Okay.
And he suggests that the data indicates we're entering a peak within one of these cycles, meaning that more seismic energy is likely to be released. He draws parallels to past periods of heightened activity that coincided with events like the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami and the 1960 earthquake in Chile.
Right. So he's saying we're due.
Yeah, the statistical probabilities suggest this elevated level of risk.
Okay, so it's not just about looking at individual events.
Right.
It's about understanding these broader patterns.
Exactly, these broader patterns of activity in the Earth systems.
Okay, so Dr. Rojas brings in this other...
The human element.
Yeah, the human element.
Yeah.
The level of preparedness globally.
Yes, and this is where it gets a little scary.
Okay.
Her research suggests that as much as 60% of the global population living in coastal areas may not know how to evacuate effectively if a tsunami were to occur.
Wow. 60%.
That's a huge number.
Yeah, that's a huge number. That's a really scary thought.
It is. And she also points to this concerning trend of continued construction and development in areas that are known to be susceptible to flooding and other coastal hazards.
All right, so we're not
learning.
Yeah, we're not learning from the past, unfortunately.
So for those of us who live in or near these at-risk zones, what can we do? Like, what are some actual steps that we can take right now?
Yeah, what can we do to actually prepare?
Yeah, to maybe increase our chances of survival.
So Dr. Rojas gives us 3 pieces of advice.
Okay, I like it.
First and foremost, she emphasizes the 72-hour emergency kit.
Okay.
And this should include all the essential supplies you and your family would need to be self-sufficient for those initial 72 hours. Drinking water, non-perishable food, first aid kit, any prescription medications, flashlight, batteries, a radio.
And just basic emergency preparedness.
Basic emergency preparedness is key.
For any disaster, really.
Yeah, for any disaster.
Yeah.
Okay, what's number 2?
Okay, so number 2 is know and practice your tsunami evacuation route with your family.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about knowing where higher ground is.
Right. It's about having a plan for how you're going to get there, taking into account potential road closures or other obstacles that might come up.
Right. You don't want to wait until the last minute to figure that out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And what's number 3?
Number 3 is advocate for robust early warning systems.
Okay.
And she points to Japan as a really strong model.
Yeah.
They have these advanced systems that can provide vital minutes of advance warning.
Yeah.
And she encourages people to reach out to their governments and demand that level of protection.
So those few minutes.
Those minutes can make all the difference.
Yeah, can really make all the difference.
Yeah.
Dr. McGann also had this really
urgent
warning about a very specific sign people need to watch out for.
If you're near the coast and you see the sea suddenly receding much further than its normal low tide mark, you need to evacuate immediately, the highest ground you can reach. So like if you see the ocean pulling back. Yeah, unusually.
That's not a good sign.
That is a sign that a tsunami is imminent.
Wow.
And you need to get out of there.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the most important takeaway for our listener?
Yeah, so the main takeaway is while we can't predict exactly when or where these tsunamis are going to happen, the data suggests a period of heightened seismic activity.
Yeah.
And that, coupled with historical patterns, suggests this elevated risk in 2025.
Okay.
So it's not about predicting disaster.
Right.
It's about acknowledging this increase in probabilities of these events.
So just being aware.
Being aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would just add to this, even if you don't live in one of these specific zones that we talked about, it's worth thinking about the emergency preparedness in your community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Understanding those basic principles and being aware of those hazards
that could occur wherever you are.
Absolutely.
That's always a good thing.
It is.
Yeah.
It's empowering.
Yeah. And we're not trying to scare anybody.
No.
We just want people to be aware.
To be informed.
Yeah, to be informed and be prepared.
Prepared, yeah.
So that they can,
stay safe.
Stay safe. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive.
It has.
Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.